This narrative takes place in the middle of Holy Week, positioned directly between the triumphal entry and the Last Supper. Jesus is teaching daily in the temple courts. His popularity with the festival crowds creates a political deadlock. The religious authorities want him dead, but they cannot act openly without risking a riot. To break this stalemate, the authorities shift their strategy. They attempt to destroy him through public traps, logical dilemmas designed to catch him in a statement they can use before the Roman governor, or to expose him as an illegitimate teacher. For this brief moment, the physical threat of arrest is suspended. The battleground has shifted to high-stakes exegesis. Understanding the mechanics of the next trap requires a look at the specific faction leading the charge, the Sadducees. Unlike the Pharisees, the Sadducees were drawn from the wealthy priestly aristocracy. They controlled the temple and cooperated with Roman authorities to preserve their social standing. Their theology was defined by a strict hermeneutical constraint. They accepted only the 5 books of Moses, the Torah, as fully authoritative scripture. Because of this limited canon, the Sadducees rejected the resurrection of the dead, the existence of angels, and the immortality of the soul. Their framework was entirely tied to this world. This forces Jesus into a defensive position. He must prove the existence of an afterlife using only the restricted texts his opponents recognize, bypassing the explicit resurrection prophecies found in later books like Daniel. The Sadducees base their trap on the law of Levirate marriage in Deuteronomy 25. This provision required a man to marry his deceased brother's childless widow to preserve the family line and protect her from economic ruin. They propose a scenario where 7 brothers marry the widow in sequence, all dying childless. Finally, the woman dies. If resurrection is real, whose wife is she? It would require forbidden polyandry. Therefore, they argue, the resurrection cannot be real. They believe they have placed Jesus in a no-win dilemma. Either affirm the resurrection and imply a violation of the law, or deny the resurrection and side with the Sadducees. This strategy weaponizes a law intended for mercy as a logical tool to annihilate the hope of life after death. Jesus dismantles the trap by exposing a flawed premise. The Sadducees assume the resurrection is simply a linear continuation of current biological life. In the present age, marriage is required for a world defined by mortality. But the sons of the resurrection are equal to angels. They can no longer die. Since death has been abolished in the age to come, the biological and social necessity of procreation disappears. The order of marriage belongs specifically to this creation. Jesus identifies the resurrection as a radical departure from human biology, entering a state where life no longer requires procreation because it never ends. Transitioning to the offensive, Jesus accepts the Sadducees' textual limits and builds his counterargument entirely from the Torah. He points them back to Exodus chapter 3, where the Lord speaks to Moses directly from the burning bush. He quotes God's words regarding the dead patriarchs, "I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." The argument rests on the present tense verb. God did not say "I was," he says "I am." If Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are dead and gone, the statement is meaningless. But if God remains their God, they must in some real sense remain alive to him. Jesus proves the resurrection through the character of God. The covenant faithfulness of Yahweh guarantees that he does not lose his people to the grave. With the Sadducees silenced, Jesus initiates his own test regarding the identity of the Christ. At the time, Jewish theology universally held that the Messiah would be a human king descending from the line of David. Jesus quotes Psalm 110, "The Lord said to my Lord." The English Lord and Lord morph into Hebrew, Yahweh and Adonai. In that culture, an ancestor was never subordinate. A grandfather did not call his descendant my Lord. By addressing his own descendant as Lord, David identifies the Messiah as both his biological son and his divine superior. This exegesis establishes the foundational doctrine of the Incarnation. The Messiah is both truly human and truly God in one person. The scribes initially approved of Jesus' victory because they shared his belief in the resurrection. However, Jesus immediately pivots to a public warning against their pattern of leadership. He points to the outward signs of their performative piety, the long robes, the prominent marketplace greetings, and the seats of honor in the synagogues. This religious show masked a predatory reality. Under the guise of legal or spiritual aid, these leaders exploited the most vulnerable, devouring the houses of widows for personal gain. Jesus warns that religious status does not grant immunity. Rather, the greater the privilege, the greater the condemnation for those who use God's service for exploitation. These three distinct episodes converge to define the relationship between belief, the identity of Christ, and the integrity of leadership. Through these exchanges, Jesus establishes the reality of a deathless age and the divine authority of the Messiah. The final takeaway is a call for accountability, distinguishing between the stagecraft of religious performance and genuine faithfulness to the vulnerable. By reversing the traps of his opponents, Jesus reveals himself as the one true teacher, the only one who integrates right belief with right practice.